If you are listening today, it means you truly want to improve your English and use it naturally in real life. You are not just studying English for exams or books. You want to speak clearly, confidently, and comfortably, just like people do in everyday conversations. No matter where you are listening from, India, Vietnam, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, or anywhere else, I'm really happy you're here with me. This episode is created especially for advanced learners who want English to feel natural, not stressful. The goal is to help English become something you live, not something you constantly analyze or translate in your head. Before we begin today's lesson, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss our daily listening episodes. Each episode is designed to help you improve step by step and build real speaking confidence over time. Every day, we focus on the kind of English people actually use in real situations, at work, in meetings, during group discussions, and in casual conversations with friends or colleagues. This is not textbook English. This is real, living English that people use without thinking too much about grammar rules. In today's episode, we're stepping into the world of high-level communication. We'll explore how to express yourself clearly in conversations that move fast, include many opinions, and require quick thinking. These situations happen all the time in team meetings, brainstorming sessions, work chats, and serious discussions where you need to sound calm, confident, and professional at the same time. Many advanced learners tell me something very similar. They say, "I understand almost everything when I listen, but when it's my turn to speak, especially under pressure, my words don't come out clearly." If that sounds familiar, this episode is for you. Together, we'll go through real conversation techniques that native speakers use every day. These techniques help them stay organized, explain ideas smoothly, and respond confidently even when conversations change direction or become unpredictable. You'll learn how to share your ideas clearly and naturally. Make your point without sounding rude or too direct. Show agreement, disagreement, hesitation, or uncertainty politely. Keep up with fast conversations without feeling lost. Answer unexpected questions without panicking. Guide discussions gently instead of forcing your opinion. These are not fancy or complicated expressions. They are simple, practical tools that professionals use every day in international companies, universities, and workplaces around the world. One important secret of advanced communication is this: your message matters more than your vocabulary. You don't need difficult words to sound intelligent. What you really need is clarity, rhythm, and emotional control. And that's exactly what we will practice today. Let's begin with a simple but powerful idea. People understand you more easily when you start with a clear direction. Native speakers often do this automatically. Before they explain something, they prepare the listener with a short opening sentence. You've probably heard phrases like, "I just want to share a quick thought. Here's what I'm thinking. Let me explain this from my perspective." Just to give you some context, these small phrases are extremely effective. They reduce confusion and help listeners follow your ideas more easily. Imagine you're in a meeting and you want to add an idea. Instead of jumping straight into details, you can say, "Let me frame this quickly," or "I want to highlight something that might help." Right away, people know what's coming and they pay more attention. Another natural habit is speaking in layers. Native speakers usually start with the general idea before moving into details. You'll often hear phrases like, "The main issue here is," "Here's the big picture." At a high level, this is what's happening. These expressions prepare the listener's mind. Once people understand the big picture, they're ready for the details. Now let's talk about pacing. Many advanced learners speak too quickly when they feel nervous. They don't want to interrupt or lose their chance to speak. But speaking too fast can make your ideas harder to follow. Native speakers often pause, not because they are unsure, but because they want their message to be clear. A short pause tells the listener, "This is important." It also gives you time to think. You don't need dramatic pauses. Just a simple rhythm: idea, pause, next idea. Another important skill is signaling transitions. Conversations move quickly, and people appreciate it when you guide them through your thoughts. Simple phrases like, "So, moving on." Another angle to consider. What this really means is, "Now, the key point is." These signals help you sound organized and confident, even when the topic is complex. Emotional tone is just as important as vocabulary. Two people can say the same sentence, but one sounds rude while the other sounds professional. The difference is tone. For example, instead of saying, "No, that's wrong," you can say, "I see where you're coming from. That makes sense, but I see it a bit differently. Let me share another perspective." These small changes help you disagree politely while still sounding confident. Throughout this episode, we'll explore many expressions like these, phrases native speakers use naturally and advanced learners can learn to use consciously. By the end of this lesson, you won't just understand English better. You'll sound clearer, calmer, and more confident in fast or complex conversations. One very useful skill is learning how to stay steady while a conversation continues around you. Native speakers don't panic when people speak quickly or when many opinions appear at once. They use simple phrases to give themselves time to think, such as, "Let me process that for a second." "Give me a moment to think this through." "Let me take a step back here." These phrases sound natural and help you stay calm without losing your place. Native speakers also clearly explain why they are speaking. This makes communication smoother. You'll often hear phrases like, "The point I'm trying to make is," "What I'm getting at is," "The reason I bring this up is." These phrases guide the listener back to your main idea, especially when conversations become unclear. Handling uncertainty is another key skill. Even experienced professionals don't always have perfect answers. The goal is not to avoid uncertainty, but to express it calmly. Instead of saying, "I don't know," native speakers often say, "It's hard to say right now, but here's what we know. Based on what we have so far, it seems likely that." These expressions sound honest while still confident. Finally, shaping your message is essential in long discussions where attention can fade. Native speakers often anchor their main idea at the beginning. For example, "Just to set the stage, here's the main idea. To give some direction, this is what I want to focus on." They also summarize before moving on. So, just to recap. In simple terms, to put it briefly, summarizing doesn't make you sound repetitive. It makes you sound clear and organized. When it comes to disagreement, native speakers layer their responses. "I hear what you're saying, though I see it differently. That's a fair point, and here's another way to look at it." They separate the idea from the person, which keeps discussions respectful. Finally, when conversations lose structure, native speakers gently guide them back. "Before we move on, let's finish this point. Let me break this into two parts." These expressions show leadership without sounding aggressive. And one last powerful tool is rephrasing, restating ideas in clearer ways to ensure everyone understands. Sometimes you can feel that your message didn't land clearly the first time. Maybe people look confused, or the conversation moves on too quickly. In these moments, instead of repeating the same sentence again, it's better to rephrase your idea. You can say things like, "Let me put that another way," or "What I mean is this," or "Another way to look at it is." Rephrasing helps bring clarity without sounding repetitive. It also shows flexibility, which is a quality people admire in strong, high-level communicators. It tells others that you care about being understood, not just about speaking. Now let's talk about something essential for advanced fluency: tempo control, or the rhythm of your speech. Native speakers naturally adjust their speaking speed based on the topic. When an idea is simple, they speak a bit faster. When it's complex, they slow down, choose their words more carefully, and pause at natural moments. Many advanced learners try to speak at one speed the entire time. This can make difficult ideas harder to follow. Instead, try this approach. Slow down slightly when you introduce a new idea. Pause after important points. Take a breath before answering a difficult question. These small changes make your message easier to understand and also signal confidence. Another skill native speakers use naturally is giving emotional cues. These are small verbal signals that show how you feel about the topic. For example, "That part surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. What concerns me here is. The good news is." These cues help listeners understand your attitude and connect with you on a human level. Communication becomes more than just sharing information. It becomes shared understanding. Next, let's look at momentum phrases. These expressions help keep conversations moving forward smoothly. They prevent your speech from sounding stuck or uncertain. Common examples include, "Going back to what we said earlier. That brings me to another point. Now that you mention it. This connects to something else we should consider." Momentum phrases make your speech sound fluid and dynamic, which is very characteristic of C1, C2 level English. By now, you can see that advanced communication isn't about fancy vocabulary. It's about making your message feel natural, organized, and easy to follow, especially in fast-moving conversations. Another skill that separates advanced speakers from others is the ability to filter information in real time. Native speakers don't respond to everything they hear. Instead, they focus on what matters most and build their response around that. That's why you often hear phrases like, "The key thing here is." What really stands out to me is. If we narrow this down to the essentials, these expressions help you identify the core idea and avoid getting overwhelmed by too many details. When you use this filtering skill, your communication becomes clearer for both your listeners and yourself. You start controlling the conversation instead of being controlled by it. Another natural habit of native speakers is recognizing the emotional temperature of a conversation. Every discussion has emotional signals, excitement, hesitation, frustration, or uncertainty. Strong communicators notice these signals and respond gently to keep balance. That's why you'll hear phrases like, "I can see there's a lot of energy around this. It sounds like this point is causing some confusion. I get the sense that we're all trying to solve the same issue." These expressions soften tension, show empathy, and help bring the group back together calmly. They are especially useful in multicultural environments, where communication styles can differ. Speaking of multicultural communication, one clear sign of C1, C2 speakers is the ability to adjust language to the listener. Native speakers do this automatically. If they sense someone is struggling, they simplify naturally. Let me simplify this. Here's the short version. Basically, what this means is, this is not lowering your level. It's showing respect. And at advanced levels, respect is one of the strongest communication tools you have. Another area many learners want to improve is entering conversations smoothly. People often hesitate because they don't want to interrupt. Native speakers use gentle entry phrases such as, "Can I jump in for a moment?" "If I can build on that idea." These phrases allow you to join naturally and confidently without sounding rude. Once you're speaking, controlling your length becomes important. Long explanations can lose attention. Native speakers usually keep things short unless more detail is requested. You can do this with phrases like, "I'll keep this brief," to give a short answer. In a nutshell, short, controlled responses sound sharp and professional. Now let's move into something more advanced, handling unexpected questions. These moments can feel stressful because you need to think quickly. Native speakers protect themselves with a short buffer sentence. "That's a great question. Let me think about the best way to explain this." Interesting point. Here's how I see it. These buffers give you time to think while still sounding calm and prepared. Advanced speakers also know how to set boundaries. You may not have enough information, or you may want to avoid guessing. Instead of feeling pressured, you can say, "I'd like to look at the data before answering fully. We might need more information before deciding. Let's not jump ahead. Here's what we know so far." These boundaries protect your credibility and professionalism. As conversations move quickly, native speakers often use bridging phrases to reconnect ideas. As we mentioned earlier, this ties back to our main question. If we connect this to what we discussed before, these phrases keep everyone aligned and are essential for advanced fluency. Now let's talk about expressing concern without sounding negative. Instead of direct criticism, native speakers soften their tone. "My only concern is..." One thing we might want to watch out for is... A small challenge here could be, to balance this, they also highlight positives. The good news is, one strong point here is, what's working well so far is. This emotional balance is a strong marker of C1, C2 communication. Another overlooked skill is managing silence. Many learners feel uncomfortable with pauses, but native speakers use silence intentionally. A short pause after an important idea gives weight to your message. Silence, when used well, can instantly raise your fluency level. Equally important is recognizing when someone is confused, even if they don't say it. Native speakers watch facial expressions, tone, and body language. When they notice confusion, they adjust. Let me rephrase that. Maybe an example will help. Here's another way to see it. These responses show emotional intelligence and awareness. Finally, let's talk about momentum control. Strong communicators guide fast conversations gently. Let's stay with this idea for a moment. Let's clarify one thing before moving on. Here's the main point. They also shape the emotional frame of discussions, especially when things feel tense. Let's look at this objectively. Maybe we can slow this down. Let's break this into steps. These phrases reduce tension and help everyone focus. People listen better when the environment feels calm and respectful. And this leads to one last skill: redirecting conversations without sounding controlling. When discussions drift, skilled speakers gently bring them back. To bring us back to the main point, let's refocus on what matters here. This is advanced communication at its best: clear, calm, confident, and respectful. These phrases help anchor the conversation in the bigger picture. When you say things like, "circling back to the core issue," or "let's bring this back to the main point," you are not shutting people down. Instead, you are gently guiding the discussion back to where it needs to go. This kind of guidance feels natural and respectful, not controlling. A closely related skill is layered contribution. This means adding value step by step instead of giving too much information at once. Native speakers rarely overload others with long explanations. They break their ideas into small, easy pieces. For example, first, here's what we know. Second, here's what we're still unsure about. And finally, here's what we can do next. This structure helps listeners follow your thinking easily, even when the topic is complex or technical. Another advanced ability is expressing tentative confidence. This is the balance between sounding confident and staying open. Native speakers use this tone when decisions are not final or when information is incomplete. Instead of sounding unsure, they use careful but confident language, such as, "It seems reasonable to assume that. Our best estimate at the moment is..." This appears to be the direction things are heading. These phrases show that you are thoughtful, analytical, and not jumping to conclusions. Now let's talk about collaborative phrasing, language that creates unity instead of division. In international and professional environments, collaboration is often more important than being right. Native speakers use inclusive language like, "Let's see how we can solve this together." One idea we might explore is, "We could approach it this way, if that works for everyone." This style builds trust, reduces defensiveness, and makes conversations smoother and more productive. Next comes a very important skill, disagreeing in layers instead of disagreeing immediately. Native speakers usually start by acknowledging the other person's point of view. That's an interesting point. I can see why you'd say that. There's definitely some value in that idea. Only after that do they introduce their own perspective, though I'm thinking about it slightly differently. Here's another angle worth considering. This is where I see a possible issue. This layered approach keeps discussions respectful and professional, which is essential at advanced levels. Now let's shift to smooth conversational transitions, one of the clearest signs of native-level fluency. Instead of jumping suddenly from one idea to another, native speakers use transition markers like, on a related note, that reminds me of something important. Before we wrap up this point, another piece of this puzzle is these transitions create flow and help listeners stay engaged. Tone control is another key skill. Native speakers adjust their tone depending on the situation. In stressful moments, they soften their delivery by speaking more slowly, lowering their volume, and choosing gentler words. Let's not rush this. We can take a moment to think this through. No need to decide right away. When clarity and direction are needed, they become more direct. Here's what needs to happen next. The priority right now is, let's be very clear about this part. Learning to shift tone like this helps you guide conversations without increasing tension. Another subtle but important skill is spotting the right moment to speak. Native speakers often enter during a small pause or a change in tone. They use soft entry phrases such as, just to build on that, if I could add something here, one quick point before we continue. These phrases allow you to speak without interrupting or sounding intrusive. Let's talk about controlling conversational speed. When people feel excited or emotional, conversations can move too fast. Skilled communicators slow things down using verbal anchors like, one step at a time. Let's pause for clarity. This might be a good place to slow down. These anchors reduce misunderstandings and keep discussions grounded. Another powerful tool is awareness phrasing, which shows that you are paying attention to both logic and emotion. I hear the concern behind that question. It sounds like we're trying to solve two issues at once. I sense there's some uncertainty here. These phrases make others feel understood and build trust. Native speakers also use micro-affirmations, small signals that encourage others to continue speaking. Right. I follow. I'm with you so far. That makes sense. These tiny responses keep conversations flowing smoothly and make others feel supported. Now let's highlight a highly advanced skill, anticipating what the conversation needs next. Skilled communicators don't just react. They ask themselves, do we need clarity? Do we need structure? Do we need reassurance? Do we need a decision? Then they respond accordingly. Let's clarify this part first. Here's a simple structure we can use. No pressure, we can take our time. Let's choose one direction so we can move forward. This ability makes you sound calm, organized, and in control. Another important part of advanced communication is using examples. Native speakers rarely explain abstract ideas without making them concrete. For example, think of it like reorganizing a room. It's similar to fixing one problem and discovering another. Imagine planning a long trip. You need directions before you start. These everyday examples help listeners visualize your message and stay engaged. Native speakers also adjust the level of detail based on the listener's needs. They might say, at a high level, here's what's happening. If you want the short version, it's this. To go into more detail. This flexibility makes communication efficient and respectful. In group settings, presence matters more than speaking the most. Strong communicators listen carefully and speak with purpose. They use small signals like, that's a useful point. I was thinking the same thing. Let me add something to that. These cues show engagement and help create a collaborative atmosphere. Another advanced skill is balancing confidence with openness. Instead of sounding rigid, Native speakers say, "From my perspective, the best approach would be, the way I see it, this option makes the most sense. I believe this direction has strong potential." These phrases show conviction while leaving room for discussion. Let's now explore reactive clarity, the ability to respond calmly when caught off guard. Native speakers often follow a simple pattern. First, acknowledge. "That's a fair point." Second, pause. "Let me think that through." Third, structure. "Here's how I'd break it down." This keeps responses clear and professional. Finally, let's talk about narrative framing. Even short explanations are easier to follow when they have a beginning, middle, and end. "Here's what happened. This led to something unexpected." So the takeaway is, this structure keeps listeners engaged and helps them remember your message. And one last reminder, knowing when to stop is also part of advanced fluency. Many learners explain too much. Strong communicators say what matters, pause, and let the conversation continue naturally. Many learners believe that using more words will make their message clearer. In reality, clarity often comes from brevity. Native speakers know when to stop. They use gentle closing phrases to signal that their point is complete, such as, "That's the main point. That's all I wanted to highlight. So, that's the update for now." These phrases prevent your message from dragging on and help keep the conversation focused instead of drifting. Now let's focus on tone correction, a subtle adjustment native speakers make when they sense confusion or misunderstanding. If they realize their message sounded too direct, they soften it. If it sounded too vague, they sharpen it. You can do this using simple tone reset phrases like, "Let me put that a bit more clearly." To be more specific, "I didn't mean for that to sound too strong." Tone correction helps maintain trust and prevents unnecessary tension before it grows. Next, let's look at anticipatory reassurance, a technique used to keep conversations calm before conflict even appears. Skilled communicators reduce pressure early by easing emotional tension. This might sound complex, but it's actually simple. "Don't worry, we don't need to solve everything right now. This is just one idea. We can explore others too." These reassurances make people feel safe and more willing to share openly. Another high-level communication habit is shaping the listener's focus. When conversations become crowded with information, native speakers guide attention toward what truly matters. What matters most here is, the part we should focus on is, the real issue underneath this is. Directing attention like this is a major source of professional influence. Now let's talk about communicative adaptability, the ability to match your speaking style to the situation. Native speakers naturally adjust depending on whether the environment is casual, analytical, emotional, or high pressure. You can do the same by paying attention to how fast others are speaking, how formal or informal the tone is, whether people are exploring ideas or making decisions, whether the atmosphere feels tense or relaxed. When you adapt intentionally, you become easier to communicate with and more effective in any setting. Another powerful strategy is bridging silence with meaning. Instead of filling every quiet moment with words, skilled communicators allow short silences to emphasize their message. When they speak again, they anchor that silence with value. So, here's why that matters. And this leads us to something important. Now let's translate that into action. Silence paired with meaning creates impact and memorability. Let's close this part with relationship-focused phrasing, language that strengthens connection. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a helpful insight. Thanks for pointing that out. These expressions reinforce respect and collaboration, which are essential for strong communication. As conversations become more complex and emotional, skilled communicators rely on depth-guiding techniques. These help groups explore ideas without feeling overwhelmed. When discussions become chaotic, native speakers use depth markers like, "Let's dig into one part of this first." Maybe we should look at the underlying issue. Let's break this into smaller pieces. These phrases slow things down and bring clarity instead of urgency. Another highly advanced skill is tone shifting for sensitive topics. When discussing feedback, mistakes, delays, or disappointment, native speakers soften their delivery. I want to approach this carefully. This might be a bit delicate, but it's important to mention. Let's talk about this openly but respectfully. This emotional preparation makes difficult conversations easier. This leads directly into constructive feedback, one of the hardest areas for advanced learners. Native speakers often use the cushion technique. Cushion message support, for example. I appreciate the effort you put into this. One part we may want to reconsider is, I think we can fix it quickly if we adjust this step. This structure protects relationships while delivering honest feedback. Now let's look at influence phrasing, guiding decisions without sounding pushy. Instead of telling people what to do, native speakers suggest direction. It might work better if one option worth considering is, what if we approached it this way? These expressions open doors and make others more receptive. Another advanced strategy is strategic repetition with variation. Instead of repeating the same sentence, native speakers adjust it slightly. We need to prioritize this. In other words, this should come first. Put simply, this is our main priority. The idea stays the same, but clarity increases. Now let's talk about handling layered questions with multiple parts or emotional weight. Instead of answering immediately, native speakers reorganize the question. There are two parts to what you're asking. Let me start with the second part. Here's how I understand your question. This gives you control and ensures accuracy. One of the most powerful but underused skills is reflective listening. Skilled communicators gently mirror what they hear, so what I'm hearing is that you're concerned about the timeline. It sounds like clarity is the main issue for you. Let me check if I understood you correctly. This reduces conflict and builds trust. Now, let's explore pressure control. When conversations become intense, native speakers use stabilizing phrases to stay grounded. Let's take a breath and look at this clearly. One moment. I want to be sure I'm not missing anything. Give me a second to organize my thoughts. These resets prevent reactive responses. Another nuanced skill is managing expectations. When expectations seem unrealistic, native speakers recalibrate gently. This may take more time than we expected. We might need to adjust our expectations here. Let's not assume we'll have an answer immediately. This builds trust through transparency. Next, let's look at pivoting smoothly, changing direction without sounding abrupt. That's helpful, and it brings us to another point. I see what you mean. Let's shift for a moment. That's one angle. Here's another way to see it. Pivoting is essential in meetings when priorities change. Another subtle technique is vocal anchoring. Native speakers slow down, lower their voice slightly, and pause before important points. This creates emphasis naturally, without saying, "This is important." Finally, let's address question framing. Instead of sounding accusatory, native speakers soften curiosity. Can you walk me through your thinking? What led to that decision? Help me understand how we got here. Many people think that using more words automatically makes their message clearer. But in real communication, clarity often comes from saying less, not more. Native speakers understand this well. They often use gentle closing phrases to show that they are finished speaking. For example, they might say, "That's the main point," or "That's all I wanted to highlight," or "So, that's the update for now." These phrases help prevent the message from dragging on and keep the conversation focused instead of drifting. Another important skill native speakers use is tone correction. This means adjusting how something sounds when they feel a misunderstanding might happen. If their message sounds too strong or too direct, they soften it. If it sounds unclear or too vague, they make it sharper. You can practice this by using simple tone reset phrases like, let me put that a bit more clearly, or to be more specific, or I didn't mean for that to sound too strong. Tone correction helps maintain trust and avoids unnecessary tension. Next comes anticipatory reassurance, which helps keep conversations calm before conflict even appears. Skilled communicators often ease tension early. They might say, this might sound complicated, but it's actually simple, or don't worry, we don't need to solve everything right now, or this is just one idea, we can explore others too. These reassurances make people feel safe and more open to discussion. Another advanced habit is shaping the listener's focus. When a conversation feels crowded with information, native speakers guide attention to what really matters. They say things like, what matters most here is, or the real issue underneath this is. This ability to direct attention is a key part of professional influence. Native speakers are also highly adaptable. They change their speaking style depending on the situation, whether it is casual, emotional, analytical, or high pressure. You can do this by noticing how fast others speak, how formal they are, and whether the mood is tense or relaxed. When you adapt intentionally, you become easier to communicate with and more effective in any environment. Another powerful skill is using silence with purpose. Skilled communicators don't rush to fill every quiet moment. Instead, they allow short pauses to emphasize their point. When they speak again, they anchor the silence with meaning by saying things like, here's why that matters, or this leads us to something important. Silence paired with meaning makes your message more memorable. Relationship-focused language is also essential. Simple phrases like, I appreciate you bringing that up, or that's a helpful insight, or thanks for pointing that out, strengthen respect and collaboration. These small expressions have a big impact. As conversations become more complex, skilled communicators use depth-guiding techniques to prevent overwhelm. They slow the discussion down with phrases like, let's dig into one part first, or maybe we should look at the underlying issue, or let's break this into smaller pieces. This encourages clarity instead of urgency. For sensitive topics, native speakers shift their tone carefully. They prepare listeners emotionally with phrases such as, I want to approach this carefully, or this might be a bit delicate, but it's important. This makes difficult conversations easier and reduces defensiveness. When giving feedback, they often use the cushion technique, appreciation first, then the message, then support. For example, I appreciate the effort you put into this. One part we might reconsider is this step. I think we can fix it quickly. This protects the relationship while still being honest. Native speakers also influence decisions gently instead of pushing. They say things like, it might work better if we, or one option worth considering is, this keeps people open rather than resistant. They often repeat important ideas, but with small variations. For example, this needs to be a priority. In other words, this should come first. Put simply, this matters most. The meaning stays the same, but clarity increases. When asked complex questions, native speakers often restructure them first. They might say, there are two parts to that question, or let me answer the second part first. This helps them respond clearly and confidently. Another powerful tool is reflective listening. Skilled communicators mirror what they hear. So what I'm hearing is that you're concerned about the timeline, or let me check if I understood you correctly. This reduces conflict and builds trust. During high-pressure moments, native speakers slow themselves down using stabilizing phrases like, let's take a breath, or give me a second to organize my thoughts. These verbal pauses prevent reactive communication. They also manage expectations carefully. If something may take longer, they say so early, this might take more time than we expected, or let's not assume we'll have an answer right away. This builds trust through honesty. When conversations need a change in direction, skilled communicators pivot smoothly. They acknowledge the previous point and redirect. That's helpful, and it brings us to another issue, or I see your point, but let's shift slightly. They also ask questions in a non-confrontational way. Instead of, why did you do that? They say, can you walk me through your thinking? This turns judgment into collaboration. Rather than pushing their own opinions, they encourage shared outcomes. What seems realistic for everyone, or how can we move forward together? This strengthens group unity. Finally, skilled communicators stay calm under pressure. When others become emotional, they respond steadily. I understand this is frustrating, or we'll figure this out together. This calm presence is one of the strongest qualities of advanced communicators. In short, effective communication is not about sounding impressive. It is about clarity, balance, awareness, and care. By practicing these techniques, you can sound more natural, confident, and professional in any conversation. Now let's shift into collaborative momentum building, which means helping the conversation move forward in a positive and productive way. Native speakers often highlight progress to keep everyone motivated. They say things like, we're making good progress, let's keep going, or we're getting closer to a solution. These phrases remind people that their effort matters and encourage them to stay engaged. Another advanced skill is context resetting. This is useful when a conversation becomes confusing or starts to drift away from the main point. Skilled communicators pause and zoom out. They might say, let's step back for a moment, or if we look at the bigger picture, resetting the context gives everyone clarity and creates a fresh starting point. Next is verbal highlighting, which helps emphasize important ideas without sounding repetitive. Native speakers use spotlight phrases such as, what really matters here is, or the key takeaway is simple. These phrases help listeners remember the most important message, even in complex discussions. Another helpful technique is graceful hesitation. Instead of using fillers like, or native speakers use thoughtful pauses and phrases like, let me think this through, or give me a second to find the right words. This shows confidence and careful thinking rather than nervousness. Now let's look at reframing, which changes how people see a problem. Skilled communicators shift perspective by saying things like, instead of seeing this as a delay, we can see it as a chance to improve, or maybe the issue isn't the timeline, it's the process. Reframing turns challenges into opportunities. Another important ability is gentle assertiveness. This means sharing your opinion clearly while staying respectful. Native speakers say things like, I respect your view, and here's how I see it, or I understand your point, but I'd like to offer another perspective. This communicates strength without creating tension. Then there's thought anchoring, which helps keep the conversation focused. When discussions move in many directions, skilled speakers bring attention back by saying, the main point I don't want us to lose is, or what really matters here is. This helps listeners stay centered. Next comes forward framing, which moves ideas into action. Native speakers guide the group by saying, here's what we can do next, or let's turn this into something practical. Forward framing builds momentum and keeps progress moving. Another advanced skill is building emotional resonance. This means connecting emotionally with others. Phrases like, I know this can feel overwhelming, or it makes sense that we're unsure, help people feel understood. Resonance makes communication feel human and supportive. A sign of true mastery is intellectual humility. Skilled communicators are not afraid to admit limits. They say, I may be wrong, but this is how I see it, or I'm open to adjusting this if new information comes in. This builds trust and encourages collaboration. As conversations continue, advanced speakers constantly make small self-adjustments. They notice reactions, tone shifts, and body language and adapt in real time. You can do this by silently asking yourself questions like, am I being clear? Or should I slow down? These quick check-ins help communication feel natural instead of forced. Another master-level skill is knowing when to create closure. Skilled communicators end discussions clearly with phrases like, so here's where we stand, or this gives us a clear direction. Closure gives the conversation structure and meaning. One powerful ability that sets advanced communicators apart is the ability to create calm during uncertainty. Instead of rushing for answers, they say, we don't have all the answers yet, but we're moving in the right direction. This builds confidence and emotional stability. Inclusion is also important, especially in complex topics. Native speakers use inclusive language like, let's think about this together, or we're all part of this. Inclusion strengthens connection, and connection keeps people listening. Advanced speakers also use emotional range in their voice. They soften their tone when comfort is needed and firm it slightly when clarity matters. This flexibility makes their message feel natural and grounded. Another key sign of mastery is the courage to slow down. Beginners often speak faster when nervous. Advanced speakers do the opposite. Slowing down gives weight to your words, shows confidence, and creates space for understanding. Finally, everything comes together in communicating with presence. Presence is not loud or dramatic. It is calm, steady confidence. It shows in your tone, your pauses, your listening, and your respect for others. When you combine presence with all the skills we discussed, clarifying, reframing, guiding, softening, and summarizing, you begin to communicate not just fluently, but powerfully. Here's the mindset native speakers use without thinking. You don't need perfect English. You need English that connects. People don't listen to your grammar. They listen to your message. So remember this final takeaway. Be clear, not complicated. Be steady, not rushed. Be confident, not perfect. And most importantly, be present. Thank you for staying until the end. If you listen this far, you're already committed to improving your advanced English in a real and meaningful way.